You think you have to die before you get resurrection? Brother, resurrection and life is standing right in front of you. Not someday, now.
You've been on the road for a while now, maybe not with sandals and dust, but with the same weight riding shotgun. You can feel it in the story before we even get there. Bethany, a house full of grief. 4 days too late. And you know that feeling, the quiet question you don't want to say out loud. If you had been here. And somewhere in you, you're not just hearing this story, you're standing in it. Watching the road, wondering why he didn't come sooner. And now it's Sunday morning in your headphones. Maybe you're not in the room, but you're not outside of it either. This is church right here. Maybe it's in your car, your kitchen, the quiet place where you needed something real. So settle in. Hey, don't rush past this one. There's something here, I promise you, with your name on it. And I'll see you on the other side.
I was thinking ahead of time, and actually when I was doing the communion meditation, that I do recognize that I don't want to fall into the trap of misapplying the hope I think that pastors, preachers have misapplied to their congregations for centuries, and that is that you actually pay attention to the finer details of the sermons. But I will say this, that if you have been with us and you have been listening, you'll know we're in the season of Lent. We just talked about how Holy Week is upon us. And from Ash Wednesday, if you think back to the times when we've been together, we have spent a lot of our time in the wilderness. And that was on purpose, because that's what those 40 days are supposed to represent. Time in the wilderness, learning to trust in the provision of God when your present circumstances don't seem to give you any indication that that's the right move. That's what God is looking for in relationship with us. And if you were with us on Wednesday night, you noticed that we came out of the wilderness and the road began to narrow. Now the road definitely begins to narrow, and it's leading to one place and one place only, and that's Jerusalem for that Passover celebration. And we've been trying to put our sandals on and walk with those folks as they make that journey. So today is another attempt for us to perhaps put our minds, our imaginations there, to imagine, to feel like what that scripture story must actually feel like. So you've been on the road now for days. The walk from the Galilee down to Jerusalem is long, it's hot, and it's familiar. You have made this trip every year since you were just old enough to keep pace with your father. You travel down the Jordan Valley, and the air is thick with heat. Your water skins empty way too quickly. And then comes that slow rise through the Judean hills, until the road levels out, and you can now begin to smell Jerusalem ahead. The smoke, the sacrifices. Too many people packed into too small of space because it's Passover. But this year's different. This year, you've made the journey with a purpose beyond the feast. You have walked this year with this rabbi, the one from Nazareth. And you've seen him do things you still can't explain without your brother-in-law trying to change the subject. But you were with him. You were a part of something. Except now, you're not sure where he is. Somewhere in the last few days, Jesus is separated from the group. You didn't see him leave. You only realized at some point that he is no longer ahead of you on the road. And you assume maybe he'd gone ahead into Jerusalem. Maybe he had business there before the feast. Maybe he wanted to arrive ahead of the crowd. It made sense, but it doesn't sit right. And it hasn't sat right for days. And the closer you get to the city, the heavier it begins to feel. You don't know where he went. And the not knowing is part of what those 4 days did to you. They made your faith heavier than your certainty. And now you're approaching Bethany. Just a mile and a half from Jerusalem. It's the last village before the climb over the Mount of Olives and down into the city. And the pilgrim road runs right through it. And even from a distance, this time, you can tell something has happened. There are too many people. And you can hear the mourning before you reach the edge of town. Lazarus is dead. Martha and Mary's brother. Everybody knows them. Jesus stayed at their house. He ate at their table. They were close. And Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. And Jesus isn't here. And that's what catches in your throat. He isn't in Bethany mourning his friend. He isn't in Jerusalem as far as you know. He's just gone. And you're standing on a road full of grieving people thinking something you don't want to say out loud. If he knew Lazarus was sick, why didn't he come? If Bethany is so close to Jerusalem, why didn't he at least stop? What kind of man heals strangers, but skips the funeral of someone he loved? And you don't have an answer. Only the ache of that question. And you're almost ready to just keep on walking into the city when someone says, "The rabbi's coming." Where the road bends and the dust won't settle, where 4 days have done what 4 days do, where the sisters have repeated the same sentence to every person who walks through their door, "If he had only been here." Where spices have now been measured, the stone has been rolled, and grief has found its rhythm, the way grief does when it lingers long enough to just seep into the walls of the room. And now he's coming up the road. Late. The way you arrive when you should have been there from the beginning. Friends, tune your ears to the reading of Holy Scripture this morning. Our account this morning comes to us from the Gospel account according to the beloved disciple John, beginning in his 11th chapter, verse 17. So when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had been in the tomb 4 days already. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 15 stadia away. Many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Then when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met with him. But Mary stayed in the house. Therefore Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will still live, even if he dies. Whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I have come to believe that you are the Christ, God's Son, he who comes into the world." And when she had said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, secretly, saying, "The teacher is here and is calling you." When she heard this, she arose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were there with her in the house and were consoling her, when they saw Mary, then she rose up quickly and went out, following her, saying, "She's going to the tomb to weep there." Therefore, when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews weeping who came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled, and said, "Where have you laid him?" They told him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. The Jews therefore said, "See how much affection he has for him." Some of them said, "Couldn't this man who opened the eyes of him who was blind have also kept this man from dying?" Jesus therefore, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, by this time there is a stench, for it has been 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see God's glory?" So they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you listened to me. I know that you always listen to me, and because of the multitude that stands around, I say this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he said this, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." He who was dead came out, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around him with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Free him and let him go." Thus ends reading a word this morning. And the dust still won't settle. The sisters have stopped saying "if." And now you are standing on the road you were ready to walk past from 5 minutes ago, but now your feet won't move. And I want to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer. Have you ever been angry at someone for not showing up, only for them to arrive and make it worse? Not worse because they were cruel, but because what they did revealed how badly you underestimated them. You thought they didn't care, and then they did something that made your anger look frighteningly small. That is where you're standing right now on that road. You were ready to write him off. Not completely, not forever, but in that quiet, human way where disappointment begins to harden our hearts. He should have been here. He should have come. And now he is here, weeping at the tomb of the man he could have saved. You hear someone behind you say what you've been thinking, right? If he could open that blind guy's eyes, couldn't he have stopped all of this? And I wonder if that's not exactly what those 4 days were actually for. Not punishment, not neglect, a furnace. Because the faith you carried on this road The faith that said, I have seen Jesus do amazing things. That faith wasn't ready for a tomb yet. It needed to be broken down into something harder, something more honest before it could hold what is about to happen. You have to lose your confidence in him before you can gain something bigger than confidence. But Jesus doesn't answer the question. He doesn't explain the delay. He doesn't offer a lesson about God's timing or God's will. He just simply says, take away the stone. And Martha, practical, grieving, faithful Martha, tries to stop him because the body has been dead for 4 days. She's trying to spare everyone what death does to a body given time. And he says to her, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see God's glory? Now, pause. Listen to what just happened. Martha said something perfectly orthodox a few minutes ago. I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. That's good theology. That's the right answer on the exam. And Jesus didn't affirm it. He didn't say, that's right, and here's how. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. He collapsed the distance. Martha's theology had put resurrection safely at the end of time, at the last day, where it couldn't ask anything of her right now. And grief does that to us. Grief pushes hope to the horizon because sometimes, and you all know this to be true, sometimes hope up close is too dangerous. If you hope for the last day, you don't have to risk hoping for this afternoon. Jesus took the one thing she was counting on later and said, it's standing right in front of you now. And then he told her to prove it. Roll away the stone. And her faith in that moment is not safe. It is a woman letting someone open a grave she has already accepted as final. Because the man asking her to do that told her everything she believed about resurrection was even closer than she could have ever imagined. And then he shouts, not softly, not privately, but with a loud voice into a sealed tomb, Lazarus, come out. And there's also a neat little tradition. I don't know if this is true or not, but Jesus has to shout and call out Lazarus by name. Because if he'd have just said, come out, all of the tombs would have opened. I don't know if that's true or not, but isn't that interesting to think about? Pretty cool. And the man who was dead came out, still wrapped, hands and feet bound, face covered, but moving and breathing. And you saw it. It's not some story you heard around a campfire, not something that occurred from a distance. You saw a dead man stand because that rabbi you have been doubting this whole time called him by name. And what do we do with that? You can't unsee it. You can't set it aside. A man dead 4 days is standing right in front of you. And Jesus, the one you thought had failed his friends, says, unbind him and let him go. And he doesn't say that to Lazarus. He says it to you, to the people standing around what would have been a grave. Jesus called him out, but he told the community to unwrap him. The calling is his. The unbinding is yours. And that's not a consolation prize handed off to bystanders. That's resurrection completing itself through your very hands. The same hands who were ready to keep on walking just 5 minutes ago. And everything you thought you understood has now shifted. And you didn't come here for this. You were just passing through. But now the road to Jerusalem seems to run through something undeniable. Whatever you thought Jesus was, prophet, teacher, healer, that category is now shattered. Because prophets don't do this. Teachers don't do this. You have been following someone who speaks to death and is answered by it. And I think what happened to Lazarus in that tomb is not the most important resurrection of the whole story. I think the most important resurrection happened in you. Standing on a road where you thought hope had been dead for 4 days, and then watch it come stumbling out into the light, wrapped in cloth, waiting for someone to finish what God had started. And you don't have language for it yet, but you can't stop talking about it. So, may the God who shows up late and shows up strong meet you on whatever road you're walking. And may he honor your road, not just his schedule. May the thing you were ready to give up on hear its name called. May someone close enough to unbind you come near and let you go. Amen? Amen. So,
you know, there's just something about this story that just won't let you stay comfortable. Because it meets you right there, in that place where you've already rolled the stone and tried to make peace with what didn't turn out the way you had planned. And still, he comes. Not early, not on your timeline, but not absent either. And he stands in front of whatever you've called finished and says, take away that stone. And that's when it gets honest. Because it means some of us have been living next to things we've buried, calling it faith, when really it's just distance. But what if he's still calling names out of the grave? Then maybe it's not over the way you decided it was over. Maybe resurrection isn't just something you believe in, it's something standing right next to you. And if you heard something today, something that caught you off guard, something that sounded like truth in a voice you hadn't heard in a while, go ahead and throw that little like in the offering plate like we do down at the church. Just says you were here and you appreciate it. And if you want to keep walking with us all the way through Holy Week and right into Easter morning, make sure you tithe or subscribe. That way you'll know when we are headed towards Jerusalem again. Until next time, friend, be blessed.